Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Back in late 1992, I was fresh out of the army and trying to figure out what to do with my life. I had served my country for 4 years, mostly doing grunt work and following orders. When I got out, I didn't have much to show for it except some discipline and a work ethic. College seemed like an option, but I needed money first and wasn't sure what I wanted to study. The job market wasn't great for guys like me. I had military experience but no college degree and no real trade skills. So when I saw an ad for a security guard position, I figured it was better than nothing. The pay was terrible, barely above minimum wage, but it was steady work and I needed something to keep me going while I figured out my next move. The security company was one of those outfits that bid low on contracts and made up for it by paying their workers next to nothing. They had guards at shopping centers, office buildings, and warehouses all over the city. The turnover was insane because nobody wanted to work for peanuts, but they had this incentive system where you got small raises at 90 days, 6 months, and 1 year if you stuck around. When I asked about the raise structure, my supervisor explained that I would get a 25-cent raise after 3 months, another 25 cents at 6 months, and 50 cents at my 1-year anniversary. I asked if people stuck around for those small amounts, and he told me that some did. He admitted it wasn't great money, but said it was honest work with flexible hours. I needed the job, so I took it. My post was at a small office complex downtown. Mostly I just walked around, checked doors, and made sure nobody was breaking in. It was boring as hell, but I'd had worse jobs in the army. The 3-month raise came through without any problems. So did the 6-month one. I was making a whopping 50 cents more per hour than when I started, but at least they kept their word. The work was easy, and I was saving up money while trying to decide if I wanted to go to college or look for something else. Then my 1-year anniversary rolled around in January 1993. I was expecting to see that promised 50-cent raise in my paycheck, but when I looked at my stub, it was only 35 cents more than the previous week. I called the office to ask about it. I told them I thought there was a mistake because my 1-year raise was supposed to be 50 cents, but I only got 35. The manager told me there was no mistake and that I got a raise just like everyone else. When I asked what he meant by everyone else, he explained that they had given all their guards a company-wide raise that month, 35 cents an hour across the board. I asked about my anniversary raise, which was supposed to be 50 cents on top of my regular pay. He told me I had just gotten a raise and that nobody gets 2 raises at once. They were trying to tell me that a company-wide raise somehow canceled out the anniversary raise they had promised me when I was hired. I pointed out that when I started, they told me I'd get 50 cents more per hour after 1 year, and that was part of the deal. The manager said I had gotten a raise of 35 cents, and if that wasn't enough for me, I could quit. I asked if he was really saying that instead of the 50 cents I was promised, I get 35 cents and should be grateful. He said that was exactly what he was saying, and I could take it or leave it. The guy's attitude was unbelievable. He was acting like he was doing me some huge favor by giving me a raise that was 15 cents less than what I was promised. And the way he told me I could quit made it clear he thought I had no other options. That's when I decided to call his bluff. I spent the next week calling in sick and showing up late while I looked for other work. I had some money saved up and my military experience was worth something to other employers. Within a few days, I had lined up a job at a warehouse that paid better and had better benefits. On my last scheduled day, I worked my shift like normal. Then, right at the end, I called the office. I told them I was the guard at the downtown office complex and that I was done. I said they needed to find someone else to cover the post. The manager asked what I meant by being done, saying I couldn't just leave without notice. I told him I sure could, reminding him that he had told me I could quit if I didn't like my pay. I said I didn't like it, so I was quitting right then and there. He said I needed to give 2 weeks' notice because they didn't have anyone to cover my shift. I told him that was his problem, not mine. I mentioned that they had managers with salaries and suggested one of them could sit there overnight. The panic in his voice was beautiful. I knew they hated paying overtime to the other guards, and all the regular guys were already at 40 hours for the week. That meant one of the salaried managers was going to have to come in and cover my overnight shift, probably for the rest of the week, until they could find a replacement. The manager suddenly changed his tune and asked if we could work something out. He offered to give me that extra 15 cents. I told him it was too late because I already had another job lined up. I said he should have thought about that before trying to cheat me out of what was promised. He insisted they weren't trying to cheat anyone and that the company-wide raise was generous. I explained that generous would have been giving me the 50 cents I earned plus the 35-cent company raise, which would have been 85 cents total. Instead, they tried to short me 15 cents and told me to quit if I didn't like it. So I did exactly that. I hung up before he could say anything else. Later, I found out they had to pay one of their district managers overtime for 3 straight nights while they scrambled to find a replacement. That probably cost them more in 1 week than my 15-cent raise would have cost them in 6 months. A few more cents an hour and they could have kept a reliable employee. Instead, their greed cost them way more money and a lot of headaches. About 6 months ago, I went through something no parent should ever have to experience. My husband and I were expecting our 4th child, and everything seemed to be going well until it wasn't. At 32 weeks, we lost our baby. The grief was overwhelming, but what made it even more complicated was that my body didn't get the memo. I was still producing milk, well, colostrum at that point, and it was physically and emotionally painful. I felt like my body was mocking me, preparing to feed a baby that would never come home. During one of my follow-up appointments at the hospital, a nurse noticed how uncomfortable I looked. She was this incredibly kind woman who had been working in the maternity ward for decades. When I explained what I was going through, she told me about something I'd never heard of before: milk donation for babies in the neonatal intensive care unit. She explained that many of the babies in the unit were born extremely premature, some so tiny and fragile that they were literally fighting for their lives every single day. These babies needed breast milk because it was easier for their underdeveloped digestive systems to process than formula, and it could literally mean the difference between life and death for some of them. The idea gave me a sense of purpose during one of the darkest times in my life. If I couldn't feed my own baby, maybe I could help save someone else's. So I started pumping around the clock. Every 2 to 3 hours, day and night, I'd sit with that pump, thinking about the tiny warriors in the unit who needed this milk to survive. It became my routine. I'd wake up, pump, store the milk properly, go about my day as best I could while grieving, pump again, and repeat. The physical act was exhausting, but it felt meaningful. I was doing something good with this painful reminder of what I'd lost. After about 2 weeks of this routine, I had built up quite a supply. The hospital had specific protocols for accepting donated milk. Everything had to be properly labeled, stored at the right temperature, and brought in within certain time frames. I had become pretty good at following all these rules. On this particular day, I had a large cooler bag full of properly stored milk to drop off. I was walking through the hospital corridors toward the unit when I had to stop at the elevator. That's where I met her. She was probably in her 50s, well-dressed, and had that look of someone who was used to being in charge of everything around her. At first, she seemed friendly enough. She complimented my cute little cooler bag and asked if I had a baby in the unit. I told her that I was actually donating milk to the babies there. She seemed sweet about it and asked how old my little one was. This was always the hard part. I'd gotten better at explaining it, but it never got easier. I told her that I had actually lost my baby at 32 weeks, but I was still producing milk, so I pumped it for the babies in the unit who needed it. I expected sympathy, or at least a polite expression of condolence. Instead, her whole demeanor changed. Her face twisted into this disgusted expression like I just told her I was feeding the babies poison. She told me that what I was doing was absolutely disgusting, and asked in horror if I was really giving my milk to other people's babies. I tried to explain that it helped the premature babies, and that many of them couldn't process formula properly. But she cut me off and called it the most unsanitary, abusive thing she'd ever heard. She said these poor babies were being forced to drink some stranger's bodily fluids and that this was child abuse. I stood there stunned. Here I was, trying to do something good during the worst time of my life, and this woman was calling me an abuser. She announced that she was reporting this to the hospital administration immediately. She claimed it was probably illegal and demanded to know how I dared to contaminate these innocent babies with my secretions. She was getting louder, and people were starting to stare. My face was getting hot, not from embarrassment, but from anger. She continued her rant, asking if I realized how disgusting this was. She demanded to know if I would drink some random woman's milk, calling it unnatural and perverted. That's when something inside me snapped. I looked her dead in the eye and asked her a simple question that stopped her cold. I asked her if it wasn't creepy to steal milk from baby calves to put creamer in her coffee. The silence that followed was beautiful. Her mouth hung open like a fish, and she just stared at me. I could see the gears turning in her head as she tried to process what I just said. I pressed on, pointing out that she thought human milk designed specifically for human babies was disgusting, but she was perfectly fine drinking milk that was meant for baby cows. Milk that had been processed, shipped across the country, and pumped full of hormones. She was turning red now, but not from anger, from embarrassment. A few people nearby had heard the exchange and were nodding in agreement with me. I finished by reminding her that these babies were premature and fighting for their lives. This milk could literally save them. But sure, let's worry about how gross it was that a grieving mother was trying to help them survive. She mumbled something and quickly walked away, practically running to the elevator when it arrived. I never saw her again. When I got to the unit and handed over my donation, I told the nurse what had happened. She rolled her eyes and said they dealt with people like that occasionally, usually people who had no idea how milk donation actually worked or why it was so important. That nurse also told me something that made my whole week. She said that in the past month, the milk I've been donating had been given to a set of twins who were born at 28 weeks. Both babies were now stable and gaining weight, partly thanks to donated breast milk. I kept donating for 3 more months until my supply naturally dried up. In that time, I learned that my milk had helped feed over a dozen different babies, some of whom went home healthy to their families. I'm glad that woman confronted me that day. Not because I enjoyed the conflict, but because it forced me to really think about what I was doing and why it mattered. I work as an electrician and have been doing it for about 15 years now. Started right out of high school when my dad got me an apprenticeship with his buddy who ran a small electrical company. Over the years, I've seen it all from simple outlet installations to complex industrial wiring. What I never expected was to use my skills to deal with my nightmare neighbor. It all started when I bought my first house 2 years ago. Small place, nothing fancy, but it was mine. The previous owner had warned me about the woman next door, but I figured everyone has neighbor disputes. How bad could it be? I found out pretty quick. My electric bills were sky high from day one, which didn't make sense. I lived alone, worked long hours, and barely used any appliances. My first bill was $187 when it should have been around $60. The second month, it jumped to $212. By the third month, I was paying $243, and I knew something was seriously wrong. After the third month of bills that were double what they should be, I decided to investigate. I started by checking all my appliances and outlets inside the house. Everything seemed normal. Then I went outside and examined my electrical meter. The numbers were spinning way faster than they should for a house with barely any power usage. That's when I caught her. It was a Tuesday evening around 6:15 p.m., and I was coming home from a job site when I saw her crouched by my outdoor electrical panel. She had somehow managed to tap into my main line and was running an extension cord back to her house. The cord was thick and industrial grade, not some cheap household extension. She had clearly done this before. I asked her what she was doing, and she told me she was just borrowing a little electricity because her power got shut off. When I explained that she couldn't just tap into someone else's electrical system because that was theft, she argued that it wasn't theft if she was only using a little bit. She said I had plenty to spare. She acted like electricity was something you could just share, like sugar or milk. I told her she needed to disconnect that right now and pay me back for what she'd used. I estimated she owed me at least $300 based on my inflated bills. Karen refused and said she'd been doing this for months without any problems. She claimed the old owner never complained about it. She even bragged that she had saved over $800 on her electric bills since she started. That explained why the previous owner moved and why my bills were so crazy. She'd been stealing electricity for who knows how long. The previous owner probably got fed up and decided it was easier to move than deal with her. I threatened to call the police if she didn't stop, but she told me to go ahead because they couldn't prove anything. She said she would just deny everything and claim I was harassing her. She was wrong about that, but I decided to handle it myself first. I disconnected her illegal connection and secured my electrical panel with a lock. The next week, I found another connection. She had somehow bypassed my lock and created a new tap point, then another. Every time I'd remove one, she'd create a new one somewhere else. She was getting creative too, running cords under fences, through small holes she'd drill, even overhead between trees. She bought special weatherproof connectors and underground cable. This woman was turning theft into an art form. I called the police twice. Both times they said it was a civil matter and suggested I contact a lawyer. The lawyer wanted a retainer fee of $500 just to send some letters. I didn't have that kind of money to spend on something that should have been simple. Karen seemed to think she'd won. She got bolder, even coming over during the day to make her connections. She would show up around 10 a.m. when most people were at work and spend hours perfecting her electrical theft system. One Saturday morning, I was in my garage when I heard drilling. I went outside and found her making what she called a more permanent connection. She said the back and forth was getting annoying. She had brought a heavy-duty drill and was boring a hole right through my exterior wall. When I confronted her about it, she brushed it off and said it was just a tiny hole that I wouldn't even notice. She claimed she was actually doing me a favor by making it more discreet. She was literally drilling through my exterior wall to run wire directly from my panel to her house. She had already drilled 3 holes and was working on a 4th. The woman had completely destroyed the siding on that side of my house. Repairs were going to cost me at least $400. That's when I decided enough was enough. I had tried being reasonable. I had tried involving the authorities. Nothing worked. Time to use my professional skills. When working as an electrician, I knew exactly how to set up what I had in mind. I spent 2 days planning and gathering the right equipment. I installed a secondary panel that looked like it was connected to my main electrical supply, but it was actually connected to a device that would deliver a harmless but memorable shock. Not enough to cause real damage, but definitely enough to make someone think twice about touching it again. The device I built was similar to what farmers use for electric fences. It would deliver a shock of about 10,000 volts, but with very low amperage. High voltage sounds scary, but it's the amperage that kills you. This would hurt and scare someone, but it wouldn't cause permanent damage. I tested it on myself first with a piece of metal to make sure it was safe but effective. I made sure the voltage was low enough to be safe but high enough to be extremely unpleasant. Think of it like a really powerful electric fence for cattle. I also installed a hidden camera so I could record what happened. If she tried to claim I hurt her on purpose, I would have proof she was trespassing and stealing. Then I waited, and I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, I was inside watching TV around 8:20 p.m. when I heard the most blood-curdling scream I've ever heard. It came from right outside my electrical panel. Then I heard cursing and stumbling around. She was yelling about being electrocuted and threatening to sue me. I immediately called 911 and told them I needed an ambulance at my address because I heard someone screaming behind my house and it sounded like they might be hurt. I made sure to sound concerned and confused about what might have happened. The ambulance arrived first, followed by the police. They found Karen sitting on the ground, shaking and cursing. She had obvious signs of electrical shock. Her hair was a bit singed, and she was disoriented. There were scattered tools around her, including wire strippers, electrical tape, and a voltage meter. The evidence of what she was doing was obvious. The officer asked what happened, and Karen immediately accused me of booby-trapping my electrical panel and trying to kill her. I told them I had heard screaming and called for help and that I had no idea what she was doing back there. I played up the confused homeowner act perfectly. When the officer asked Karen what she was doing at my electrical panel, she stammered that she was just checking something. The officer could see the obvious evidence of tampering though: drill bits on the ground, extension cords, and fresh holes in my house. There were also the professional tools she had brought with her. The officer asked me if she had been tampering with my electricity, and I explained that she'd been stealing power for months and I'd had to keep disconnecting illegal connections she made. I showed him the holes she had drilled in my house and the damaged siding. I estimated the damage at about $600. When the officer asked if I had modified my electrical panel in any way, I told him I was a licensed electrician and maintained my own electrical systems according to code. I showed him my license and explained that all electrical work was done to proper safety standards. Everything I had installed was completely legal and up to code. The officer walked around looking at everything. The beauty of my setup was that it looked completely normal from the outside. Just a standard electrical panel with standard safety features. The shock device was completely hidden and looked like normal electrical equipment. The officer told Karen that she was trespassing and tampering with electrical systems, which was dangerous and illegal. He explained that what she was doing could be charged as theft of utilities, criminal trespass, and vandalism. That could mean up to 2 years in prison and fines of up to $10,000. Karen protested that I had shocked her on purpose, but the officer explained that electrical panels can be dangerous if tampered with, and that's why there are warning labels. He pointed out all the warning stickers on my panel that clearly stated the dangers. He also noted that she had professional tools with her, which showed premeditation. The paramedics checked her out. She was fine, just shaken up and embarrassed. No burns, no lasting damage. Just a very memorable lesson about the dangers of messing with electrical systems. They recommended she see her doctor the next day just to be safe. After everyone left, the officer came back to talk to me privately. He suspected what I had done but couldn't prove it. He told me he understood my frustration but warned me to be careful. He also said that Karen's behavior was escalating and suggested I document everything. He gave me a case number and told me to call if she bothered me again. I never had another problem with Karen stealing my electricity. She avoided me completely, which was exactly what I wanted. My electric bills went back to normal the very next month. Instead of paying over $200, I was back to paying around $65. I finally got some peace and could actually afford my utilities. But the story doesn't end there. 2 weeks later, Karen tried a different approach. She called the city inspector and claimed I had illegal electrical work done on my house. The inspector came out and examined everything. Since I'm a licensed electrician and all my work was up to code, he found nothing wrong. He did notice the holes Karen had drilled in my house though. When I explained what happened, he wrote her up for vandalism. The inspector also discovered that Karen's house had multiple code violations. She had been doing her own electrical work without permits. Her power had been shut off not for non-payment, but because the city deemed her house unsafe. She owed over $1,500 in fines and repair costs before they would turn her power back on. A few weeks later, I saw a for sale sign go up in her yard. She decided it was time to find a new neighborhood to bother. The house sold quickly to a nice young couple who introduced themselves and thanked me for being a good neighbor. They had heard about the previous owner from other neighbors. Karen's final act of spite was leaving a bad review about the neighborhood online. She claimed the neighbors were unfriendly and that there were electrical problems in the area. Several neighbors replied with a real story about her theft and vandalism. The review was eventually removed. 3 years ago, I started a new job. The hours were brutal, and I found myself stress eating constantly. Between the vending machine snacks and takeout dinners at my desk, I slowly put on weight, about 2 dress sizes worth. I didn't really think much of it at the time. I was focused on building my career, and honestly, I felt fine. My best friend since college got engaged at the end of last year. We've been close for almost a decade, and she immediately asked me to be her bridesmaid. I was thrilled and said yes without hesitation. She seemed so happy, and I was excited to be part of her special day. Around the same time, I started feeling like I wanted to make some changes. It wasn't about looks, really. I just wanted to feel stronger and have more energy. The wedding seemed like a perfect goal to work toward. I started going to the gym before work and meal prepping on Sundays. Nothing extreme, just trying to build healthier habits. The weight started coming off gradually. I felt amazing, more confident, sleeping better, just overall happier. I didn't make a big deal about it or post about it on social media. It was just a personal journey I was on. Fast forward to last weekend. We had our bridesmaid dress shopping appointment, and I was so excited. There were 4 of us total: me, my friend, another girl I know pretty well, and one I'd only met a few times. From the moment I walked into the bridal shop, something felt off. My friend kept giving me these weird looks, like she was studying me. When I tried to join conversations, she'd talk over me or change the subject. The other bridesmaids didn't seem to notice anything, so I figured she was just stressed about wedding planning. After we finished at the shop, I asked her if she wanted to hang out like we usually do. We live pretty close to each other, and it's our normal routine after doing wedding stuff. She just scoffed and told me she was going home. I asked what was wrong and if I had done something to upset her. That's when she completely lost it. I was so shocked I can barely remember everything she said, but the main points were burned into my brain. She started yelling about how obvious it was that I was trying to lose weight just to upstage her at her wedding. She said I was already the skinny friend in the group, and now I was just making it worse by trying to make everything about me. She was furious that I hadn't even asked her permission before starting my weight loss journey. I stood there with my mouth open. She went on to accuse me of wearing baggy clothes on purpose to hide my weight loss because I knew what I was doing was wrong. I tried to explain that I was just wearing comfortable clothes because I hadn't bought new things yet, and that I had no idea this would be a problem. She snapped back that, of course, I didn't think about how this would affect her vision for her wedding day. I tried to explain that I'd started my health journey before she even got engaged, but she wasn't listening. She walked off, leaving me standing there completely confused. I spent the whole week thinking maybe I really had messed up somehow. I'd never been a bridesmaid before, maybe there were rules I didn't know about. Since I was away for work, I decided to call her and try to clear the air. That was a mistake. I started by telling her I really didn't mean to make her feel bad, and I wanted her to know I had started working on my health before she even got engaged. I asked if she really thought I would try to upstage her at her wedding. Apparently, asking that question was like lighting a fuse. She exploded, screaming about how I think I'm so much better than her. She claimed that whenever we go out together, nobody even looks at her because they're all staring at me instead. This was news to me. She's actually really pretty, and I've always thought of myself as pretty average. Then she dropped the real bombshell. She told me that her ex-boyfriend was going to be at the wedding, and that he had been thinking about leaving his fiancée to ask me out. She said she had to talk him out of it. I felt sick to my stomach. First of all, that's disgusting behavior from him. Second, I had no idea any of this was happening. And third, it was becoming crystal clear that she was still hung up on this guy. I told her I had no idea about any of that and I would never get involved in something like that. She cut me off and delivered her ultimatum. She said I was uninvited from the wedding unless I put the weight back on. If I gained it back, then I could come, but not as a bridesmaid. I actually laughed. The whole thing was so absurd. I asked her if she really wanted me to gain weight back just to attend her wedding. She said that if I were really her friend, I would consider it. That's when I knew this friendship was over. I told her I thought we both knew that wasn't going to happen, and I wished her good luck with her wedding. Then I hung up and immediately blocked her number. The crazy part is, she's always had a temper. She's flipped out at me before over random stuff like when I got a promotion she wanted or when a guy she liked asked me for my number instead of hers. But I always made excuses for her behavior because we've been friends for so long. I can see the pattern now. She's always needed to be the center of attention, and whenever something good happened to me, she found a way to make it about her or make me feel guilty about it. Her demand that I gain weight back just gave me extra motivation to keep going with my health journey. I've lost even more weight since that phone call, and I feel better than I have in years. A few mutual friends have reached out asking what happened. Apparently, she's been telling people I abandoned her right before her wedding and that I'm a terrible friend. When they hear the real story, their jaws drop. One friend told me that the bride-to-be has been calling around trying to find a replacement bridesmaid, but she is being so picky that nobody wants to deal with her drama. I heard that her ex, the one she's apparently still obsessed with, had RSVP'd that he won't be attending after all. His wife put her foot down after hearing about some of the bride's behavior, so now she's stressed about her vision being ruined, down a bridesmaid, and the guy she's still pining after won't even be there to see how beautiful she looks. Meanwhile, I'm over here living my best life, fitting into clothes I haven't worn in years, and realizing I dodged a major bullet. I used to think losing a best friend would be devastating. Turns out losing a toxic friend who tried to control my body and sabotage my happiness feels pretty liberating. The wedding is next month and I'll be spending that weekend at a spa with some real friends who actually support my goals and celebrate my successes. I had been working at this company for almost 8 years on a fixed contract. The writing was on the wall, my contract was coming to an end, and they weren't renewing it. I had done the math and figured out that waiting for redundancy would actually pay me more than jumping ship early to find another job. The redundancy package was decent, so I decided to stick it out. My boss must have seen the same writing because he started taking more and more time off. Then one day, he just left completely. No proper handover, no transition plan, nothing. He just walked out and left everything in chaos. Administrative tasks started piling up, and people were leaving left and right. The place was turning into a ghost town. Since I had been there for 8 years, I had accumulated a lot of annual leave. We're talking about weeks and weeks of unused vacation time. With redundancy still months away and my boss gone, I figured this was the perfect time to take a proper holiday. I hadn't had a real break in ages. I went into the human resources system and booked 2 weeks off. I made sure to tell everyone who would listen about my vacation plans. I put it in the shared calendar, sent emails to my remaining colleagues, and basically announced it to anyone who cared. The only problem was that since my boss had abandoned ship, there was nobody around to actually approve my leave request in the system. But I figured everyone knew I was going, so what could go wrong? I had an amazing 2 weeks off. I relaxed, recharged my batteries, and came back to work refreshed. Nobody said anything about my vacation. No angry emails, no disciplinary meetings, nothing. Life went on as normal in our slowly emptying office. When we got closer to the end of the contract, I started tying up loose ends and preparing for my departure. I reached out to human resources to ask about my final payments, including what would happen to all my unused holiday entitlement. This was important because they owed me money for all those banked vacation days. That's when I got a response that made my blood boil. The human resources representative sent me this condescending message about how I hadn't properly managed my leave account. She went on and on about how unprofessional it was to have unapproved leave requests sitting in the system. Karen told me I needed to clean up my act before they could process my final payments. She complained that I had outstanding leave requests that were never properly approved and said this was exactly the kind of sloppy record keeping that created problems for everyone. Here I was, about to be made redundant after 8 years of loyal service, and she was lecturing me about paperwork that wasn't even my fault. My boss had left without approving anything, but somehow this was my problem to solve. I explained to her that I had taken that leave months ago with full notice to everyone. I told her my manager had left the company without approving it, but I had definitely taken the time off. Karen wasn't having any of it. She told me that wasn't how the system worked. She said if it wasn't approved in the system, it didn't happen officially. Then she demanded that I cancel the request immediately so they could close my account properly. The sheer arrogance was incredible. She was treating me like some kind of troublemaker instead of acknowledging that their own management failures had created this mess. But then it hit me, she was actually giving me exactly what I needed to get revenge. I told her fine, I would cancel the leave request right away. And that's exactly what I did. I went into the human resources system and canceled my leave request for those 2 weeks I had already taken and enjoyed months earlier. The moment I canceled it, those 10 working days went right back into my banked annual leave balance. A few weeks later, when my redundancy package was calculated, guess what happened? They had to pay me for all my unused annual leave, including those extra 10 days that had just been added back to my account. Not only had I enjoyed a fantastic 2-week vacation, but now they were paying me for it like I had never taken it. The math worked out beautifully. 2 weeks of vacation pay at my daily rate plus the original vacation I had enjoyed for free. Karen's attitude problem had just cost her company a significant chunk of money that they didn't need to spend. When I got my final redundancy paperwork, I could see the vacation payout clearly itemized. There it was, payment for annual leave that included those exact same days I had spent relaxing on a beach months earlier. The irony was perfect. I never bothered to explain the situation to Karen or anyone else in human resources. They had made their bed with their condescending attitude and rigid adherence to bureaucracy over common sense. If they were too arrogant to recognize their own mistake, that was their problem, not mine. The company went out of business entirely about a year later, so I guess their financial management skills were consistent across the board. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.